Hey guys, I'm Sonnet with Sonnet's Garden Blooms. I want to welcome you all back to my channel. Now in today's video, I'm continuing to prep for Antique Acres, which is next weekend. And I am taking 5 items that I've recently thrifted and I am flipping them. One being that really cool vintage ironing board. I know many of you have asked, like, what are you going to do with it? I can't wait to see what you do with it. So, and wait till the end. I do have a question for you. I have one additional idea and I want to find out what you guys think. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's video.
For project 1, we are taking this vintage scrub board and we are going to flip it. I picked it up on a recent haul. I did pay $7.99 for it, but I absolutely loved it. It was in really good condition and I didn't want to do anything to that back piece. It still had some writing on it. But first and foremost, I wanted to get it nice and clean. It was a bit dusty, like it had been in somebody's basement, all full of cobwebs and all that good stuff. So I wiped it down really well. And then I let it dry thoroughly. And then I am going to come back and we are going to paint the front side. So my vision here is we're going to take DIY's paint White Swan and we are going to just paint that little section in the front. I actually, looking at it now, I probably could have just stamped it, but I wanted to add just a little bit more white in that area. So I'm going to add just one even coat to the entire, this little square section. So when I said I was going to paint the front, I just want to paint within that square. And typically with white, I always do 2 coats, but my vision here is I do plan on distressing it back a bit. I really liked how that grain was showing and I want to keep that even though we're making this a little bit brighter. So I'm going to wet distress it and I just take an old rig and I have it damp, not sopping wet, but just damp enough. And I'm going to, again, bring that grain out that was initially showing a bit. And I'm just going to just naturally make it look like it did a little bit. Just natural distressing from washing clothes. Now I'm going to use one of my favorite sets of stamps from IOD. It's called Typesetting. And the reason I like it so much is it has the capital letters, the lowercase, and a set of numbers. We're going to use the capital letters and we are going to stamp on here wash. I'm going to use the IOD permanent ink black. And we are going to take that ink pad and completely cover each of the letters with that. Now, a tip for you, when you are storing your ink pads, I recommend storing them ink side down. That way, when you're ready to use them, you don't always have to add additional ink to it. All the ink will be right on the surface. So that is a little tip there. I've also been asked why I use my ink pad to ink it up and not a brayer. I typically use my brayer when I'm using paint. Now, this does give it a nice even coat as well, so there's really no need for that brayer. I mean, you can if you want. I have seen other stockists use brayers as well. It might just be a personal preference. But when you're ready to go ahead and stamp it, just centerize the letters or centerize it on the board and then go all in. So when you put it down, I just recommend holding it in place so it doesn't move and then going to each of the letters and rubbing very gently and just making sure that all the ink is transferred onto the washboard or whatever you're stamping. Now, what I realized here is I missed a spot. So I laid it back down and I just retouched that letter S. Now, the ink, that IOD ink is permanent, so there's really no reason to seal that, but I did want to seal the DIY paint. Anytime you're using any of the DIY paint, you do need to seal it or it can be reactivated. And I just applied a nice even coat of Big Top to the entire washboard, and then I let it dry and it was finished. For project 2, many of you may remember I picked this up on a haul and I paid $9.99 for it. I really loved it, and initially I thought it was a shelf so you could set things on it, but I was told it's actually a wine bottle holder, so thanks for everyone that made those comments. A viewer also recommended I painted charcoal because I was completely stumped. Initially I wanted to paint it a mint, then I was thinking like farm fresh, and I just kept going back and forth, and once that viewer said painted charcoal, I'm like, yes, that's what I'm gonna do, and it was a great decision. So I applied one even coat of the old school DIY paint to the entire piece, and I decided that I wanted the grain to come out a bit. So I'm going to go back and I am going to just take my hand sander and just lightly sand it to bring some of that grain out before I clear coat the DIY paint. And now I'm going to show you that it was pretty easy to paint it, but because of the grain of the wood, around these knobs, it was really hard to fill in. If it would have been nice and smooth, it would have, I think, filled in a little bit easier. So I would have to jiggle my little paintbrush and get in there. The nice thing too about the DIY paint, because it is clay based, I can go back and take a damp rag if I got any on the actual knobs and just wipe it right off, because DIY paint is reactivated with water until it is sealed with a top coat. I really think the charcoal color really makes all the knobs pop. I think if I would have gone with a black, it would have just been too harsh. So I am very happy with the decision that I made. So now that the entire piece is dry, which it did not take long with this warm weather, I went in with my hand sander and just went all over the entire piece and brought out that grain of the wood that I talked about. This was a really quick process, and I just randomly did it all over. And not a lot of thought went into it. I just just all over the edges, the top, and again, the grain just naturally came out just a little bit. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to clear coat it with a top coat. So I did have some extra poly that I've been trying to use up. I prefer to use Big Top, but again, I'm trying to finish up some of the other supplies. Anytime you are using DIY paint, you just need to apply any type of top coat and just evenly do that. And like I said, I used the polyacrylic in the satin is what I had always liked to use. And that's what I'm using here to completely seal the piece. For project 3, I found this cutting board. It wasn't anything special, and I think that says $2.99. I definitely need readers, guys. But I'm going to peel the tag off, wipe it down very thoroughly, and then we are going to apply White Swan to the top. My vision here is that a while ago I had a riser and I did the same thing with it. I loved how it turned out. I used the new transfer called Desperado, and I used the flowers in that transfer. So because I really like that on that riser, I am going to do the same thing to this cutting board. So I'm going to apply just one coat evenly to the breadboard or the cutting board, and then I'm going to let it dry thoroughly. What I did do is I went back and I did lightly distress it with my sander just on the edges. just to clean it up a little bit, and then we're going to apply the transfer. Prior to applying the transfer, I should say you always want to seal your paint. So I went in with my polyacrylic here, and I applied one even coat of the polyacrylic to the entire piece. The other thing I should recommend is make sure that your top coat, whatever you're using, is completely dry. There has been times where I get too impatient and I try to apply my transfer far too soon, and it actually pulls the paint up and the transfer doesn't stick properly. Now that it is thoroughly dry, here is that Desperado transfer that I talked about. I love this set of transfers, and I cannot wait to use the rest. I've really only dabbled with it a bit, and this is the flowers in the transfer. With this, my vision here is I'm going to put this on one portion of it, and then we're going to add a little bit of transfer to the top portion. That way, if you're going to use this, to display something, it's not directly in the center. You can still display something on here, but when you're using the transfers, you just set it down, you use that transfer stick, and you rub very thoroughly over the entire piece. And then what I do is I lift and I continue to lift gently and then rub. If any of the transfer does not stick, I just lay it right back down and I rub a little bit more, and then it comes right off. I do that to the entire piece, and then after you're done having the transfer completely put on your piece, you want to do what's called burnish it. So that backing that the transfer was initially on, I just take that and I rub over the entire transfer completely to make sure that it's really embedded in my piece of furniture, or like this cutting board. And then once you're done with the transfer being put on, what I recommend is to apply a clear coat over it to completely seal that in there. And I just love the black and white look of this, and I just think these roses are absolutely gorgeous. So now I'm going to apply the clear coat, and I just apply a nice even layer of the polyacrylic to the entire piece, and I'm going to let it dry thoroughly. This completely seals your transfer in place. For project 4, I found this bench at the local Goodwill. I paid $5.99 for it, and it was in really good condition. It just needed to be recovered, and right away I knew that I was going to use Monet's Garden to paint it, and I was also going to use a piece of fabric that I found at Walmart. It is the the Pioneer Woman for the fabric. So I take the top off. If you haven't recovered anything before or painted something that needed to be recovered, typically there are screws on the bottom or underneath, and you unscrew all 4 and then take it off. That way you can recover it and you don't get anything on the fabric if you choose not to recover it. When I am painting spindles, I do like to use a round brush like this. It really makes getting into all those little grooves and crevices so much easier. And I ended up getting this from Debbie's DIY. She actually had some kind of special going on when we placed an order. She sent some fun items, and this was one of the brushes, and I really liked it. So now I'm going to go in with my hand sander, and I am going to just randomly sand different areas of the bench. This makes it just go really quick. I have a lot of projects to complete, so I'm going to just randomly sand the areas. Also, one thing, be very careful when you're sanding on the spindles. You can definitely over sand an area. But here you have it, the finished product after I've completely sanded it. And again, I really wanted it to look aged. And then after that, I apply a top coat to completely seal the entire piece. But here it is, and I just love Monet's Garden. And it's not completely dry just yet, but I wanted to show you just how dark it gets by applying the top coat. Now here is the fabric that we're using today. It is from Walmart, and it is the Pioneer Woman. I'm trying to show you here what it looks like next to it. The lighting is a little wonky outside though, but it does match up perfectly. So I'm going to lay out my fabric. I'm going to set the top on, and I'm just going to measure exactly where I want to start stapling. What I like to do is staple one side first, and then go ahead and then staple the other edge. And then I'm going to cut off any excess. Now that the excess is cut off, the key here is you want to pull the fabric on the other side fairly tight, but you don't want to distort the actual design of the fabric. And I do that along the entire piece. I go and I check just to make sure it's looking okay. And I realized on that side that I had not pulled it tight enough over there. The nice thing was I was able to very easily pull out just that one staple and then re-staple it, and I do that to the entire piece. So from here I get all of the edges done, and then I work on my corners. Before I work on my corners though, I want to make sure that it all looks good, which it does. So then I apply just a couple more staples right near the edge, and then I'm going to start working on my corners. And what I do is I just do a nice little fold, and I apply 2 staples to that, and then I cut off any of the excess. So I've done that to all 4 corners, and here is the finished recovering. I think it turned out beautiful, and I'm thinking it's going to look great on the chair. Now to reapply it, what I do is I line it up really well before I start screwing it in, and I make sure that the holes line up, and then I just screw them right back in, and it goes back together quite easily. And I no need for my screw gun. I can just screw it by hand to all the 4 corners. So for my 5th and final project, I picked up this vintage ironing board on a haul quite some time ago, and I didn't know exactly what I had planned on doing with it, so it kind of hung out in my living room for a while. Then it made its way out into my stash. But now I know exactly what I'm going to do with it. I'm using DIY's White Swan, and I am going to apply 2 coats to the entire piece. What I did not take into consideration is after I applied the 2 coats, I clear coated it so I could apply a transfer, and I had a lot of bleed through. So I should have gone ahead and put down a clear coat prior to applying the paint. Live and learn. And so after I applied the poly over the 2 coats, I went back and I applied another coat of White Swan and applied another clear coat, and then it was ready. Also, as I was starting to paint, I'm like, oh, that's right, I forgot to take this. There was like a old sticker, like it was a vintage sticker that was on there, which probably would have been really cool if the whole sticker would have been there. But I just used my scissors and I scraped the rest of it off. Now that it's completely dry and I've used up all of my polyacrylic, I am going to use Big Top, which is by far my new favorite top coat, and I am going to apply a nice even layer of Big Top to this prior to applying the transfer. So my vision here is I want to use IOD's Transfer Redoubt 2, and I thought this was beautiful. I don't know where I came up with this vision, but I want to, on the lower half, just create like almost like a bed of roses, and initially that's what I was going to do, and then in the end I added one additional one to the top. It just took me a little bit to figure out exactly how I wanted to lay this out, and just when I started to do this, the wind really started picking up, which made it a bit chaotic with all these different transfers. I'm trying to piece them and lay them out, and the wind just got really crazy at that point. So what I decided to do is just start small, and initially I wanted to lay them all out, but I'm like, you know what? With the wind, I can't do that, and I didn't want to pick up my entire project and bring it in the house. So I just thought, well, I'm going to start here and work my way around and make them all fit. After playing around with this a little bit, I realized how much I really liked this transfer because there were so many different roses, and I could cut and piece different stems, and it was really cool. I definitely like transfers that there's a lot of possibilities where you can create your own vision. And here I'm starting in the corner just like I did with the when I did the cutting board, and I'm rubbing and pulling the transfer pad or piece back, and then I burnish it, and then I'm going to go and start applying the roses, and I just lay it out how I think I want it to fit. And my vision, like I said, is I kind of want to almost make like a U shape on the bottom, and then work my way. I'm just going to start here and work my way around. This definitely took me a little bit because of the wind, but I really think this turned out great. So I continue on and I just apply the next piece, and it just kind of all comes together. I really think all the different colors in the different flowers just really complement each other. Nothing, they weren't identical, and that's what I loved about it. So some of the roses were a little bit darker, some were a little bit lighter. The one thing too that I wanted to mention is on one of when I'm rubbing really hard like that, or like not really hard, but when I'm rubbing, my stick actually hit one of the transfers and it made just like this tiny little nick, and I'm like, no, I wrecked it. And I remembered seeing that another stockist had used like a clay style paint, and actually just blend it the paint right to like blend it. They wanted to change the actual color of the actual transfer. And so they just painted and blended with the paint. And I thought I could do that. So I went and I got marquee from DIY and I added a little bit of the marquee in there and I just blended it in, and you never could see that I did that little nick in that transfer. So that is just a little tip. Even if you don't like the green exactly, you can always just add a little bit of paint to it, and you then seal it after it's all on, so it all really comes together. Now that you saw how I got this started, I am just going to put the rest in super fast mode, you listen to some music, and just show you how it all finishes out.
So what did you guys all think? What was your favorite item for the ironing board? Do you think I should add the word laundry? So all the way vertical down, just have it in black letters, laundry. I was videotaping that little segment of it and I'm like, maybe I should add something to it. So in the comments, let me know, do you think I should add laundry to the ironing board? So I also want to find out, what was your favorite item today? I love that little bench. I love Monet's garden. It is so beautiful. So as I was painting things today and prepping, if you remember a while ago, I picked up 2 doors. I am going to take one door and I am going to paint that Monet's garden, and I'm going to distress it and make it look all shabby chic. I did receive a comment recently that said, why do you shabby chic things? That's just my style. It's just how I like things. And when you have everything just perfect, there's always the opportunity for somebody to ding the item in your booth, and then it's not perfect anymore. So I don't find it tacky, and she told me that she thought it was tacky that I shabby chic things, but it's my look and I like it. So with that said, if you haven't been to my channel before and you do like videos like this, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I do a lot of DIYs, furniture flips, thrift hauls. I'm bringing you guys along during my journey of antique acres, so really a day in the life of a small business owner. And if you like today's video, go ahead, give it a thumbs up. And I'd love to hear about the ironing board. I want to know what you guys think. So Monday's video, I am continuing to videotape today. Once this is edited, I'm going right back out there and I am continuing to flip some furniture yet. Just a lot. I have a lot, guys. Tomorrow is dedicated to all painting. So I have several big pieces to paint. There is just still a lot of items that I need to prep for this. And I keep thinking, I could have gotten so much more done, but here in Wisconsin, it rained. It was rainy, it was cold, it was just terrible. And now it's like hot and humid. It's like weather we get in July. So the weather has not been very cooperative with me prepping for Antique Acres, but that's okay. I'm very happy it's nice and toasty warm out there versus this winter when it's negative. But yes, so Monday you will see more thrift flips, and then on Friday I am going to bring you along and show you the whole process of setting up and little clips of that and all my vignettes. So I hope to see you then. Have yourself a great weekend, and we will see you Monday. Bye.